All right. Do you want to turn your camera on for just a few minutes while we introduce you? There you are. Wonderful. All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us at Hatfield's monthly virtual Science on Tap. I'm hoping you're somewhere comfortable with good food and good drink since we're not able to get together at the local pub, but we're happy to have you join us. My name is Cinnamon Moffett, and I'm the Research Program Manager at Oregon State University's Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport, Oregon, and I'll be your host for this evening. We are on a webinar format, which means you do not have a mic or camera or screen share capabilities, but we would love it if you would join us by entering any questions you might have in the chat box. You can find that call out if you scroll your mouse down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you'll see a little box that says chat. Feel free to put your questions into the chat box at any time, and then our speaker will answer them this evening at the end of his talk. I also wanted to let you know that this event is being recorded and will be available at the place that I just put in the chat, so it gives you a chance to check finding that chat box. That's the past seminar page for Hatfield, and that's where we post all of our past seminars. And so in a couple days, you'll be able to watch it again if you missed something. I also wanted to just promote our next virtual Science on Tap, which will be November 19th at 6 p.m. It is going to be a talk about the new vertical evacuation building at Hatfield and the life safety features that are built into that building. So we're really excited about the addition of a new space at Hatfield, and we'll be excited to share it with you. If you want to learn more about any of the events at Hatfield, just Google or use any platform that you use and type in HMSC and scroll to the bottom of our homepage. You'll find our calendar of events, and all the information you need to join us will be there. But for tonight, I want to introduce tonight's speaker. Tonight we have Bob Pitman. He is a marine ecologist with the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife at Oregon State University, and is a Marine Mammal Institute affiliate at Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport, Oregon. During the past 35 years, Bob has worked as a marine ecologist for NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service in La Jolla, California. He has participated in over 150 scientific research cruises in all the oceans around the world, including more than 20 trips to Antarctica. He has published the same amount or more papers in peer-reviewed literature, so over 150 papers that I could see, and authored 5 books, including 2 editions of the Guide of Marine Mammals of the World. In recent years, Bob's main research interests have been around the ecology of killer whales, and Bob joined the Marine Mammal Institute at Hatfield sometime in 2019. I think it was right at the end there. And we're so excited to have him as our speaker today. So please welcome Dr. Bob Pitman. And Bob, the stage is yours.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to almost be here today. As Cinnamon said, I've spent most of the last 40 years or so studying marine mammals around the world, and I have become particularly enamored of killer whales. I think they have to be the most spectacular animal on the planet. And so this evening I'll spend some time and share with you some of my interest in this animal. Okay, the very first question I get asked all the time is, are they orcas or are they killer whales? They are both or either. People who get a little emotional about killer whales prefer the term orcas generally because they think killer whales are a little derogatory. Those of us who spend time studying killer whales generally tend to prefer the name killer whale, and I will use that during this talk.
No. Yeah, they're seeing you.
Okay, I'm going to get rid of that. Orcinus orca, or the killer whale, is the largest, most powerful predator on the planet today, and probably hasn't had anything even close to it for the last 60 million years, back when the dinosaurs roamed the planet. Killer whales are the largest dolphin. Adult males are almost 30 feet long in large populations, and weigh up to about 5.5, 6 tons. They are strongly sexually dimorphic. Sexually dimorphic just means that when you look at adults, you can tell males from females. One of the main things is the dorsal fin of the male is about twice as big as the dorsal fin of the female. Plus he has much larger pectoral flippers, even larger than this. Another thing I'll be talking about is the eye patch, this white area, the eyes just in front and below that patch, and the saddle patch, a pigmented area behind the dorsal fin. So here's a look at those enormous pectoral flippers of the adult male. These are probably not very useful for them. They are probably akin to a tail on a peacock. They use it for attracting females. And here's the distribution of the killer whales shown in pink here. Killer whales are probably the most widely distributed animal on the planet. They are literally found from the ice edge in the north to the ice edge in Antarctica, and even deep into the ice in Antarctica. But they are much more common in higher latitudes because there's a lot more prey there. You can find them anywhere in the tropics, but they get pretty thin. A few things about killer whales. They live human lifespans. Males probably live to be about 50 years. Some of the females, it looks like they may be going 80 or maybe 100 years. We don't know yet. We haven't been studying them that long. They live in family groups their entire lives. This means there's kin selection. You do things, you respond differently to members of your own family than strangers. They have cooperative foraging. They share all the food that they catch, and they have cultural transmission. That means they teach each other. They live in matrilines, and that means that the group is run by the oldest female. She lives with her offspring and her daughter's offspring. The males breed outside the group, so they're all one big happy family. In addition to being matrilineal, they are matrifocal, and that means mom runs the show. She is the corporate memory, and pretty much they don't do things unless she okays it. Very different kind of society. And the females have a long post-reproductive period, menopause. Female that lives 80 years may have 5 offspring during her first 40 years, and then she won't have any offspring for the next 40 years. The only animals on Earth that do this are a couple other cetacean species and human beings. Turns out grandmothers are very important for raising grandchildren. So when I first started looking at killer whales, and we saw groups like this swimming around, it was always assumed that that big male was there with his harem. Those were as many females as he could corral up, and those were all his offspring. But now we know it's quite different. He's actually a mama's boy. He spends his whole life traveling around with his mothers and sisters. So what's for dinner? Turns out killer whales eat just about everything that's large and swims or flies over the ocean. And you can see some of the things here. There's sharks, walruses, any kind of large fish. They eat quite a few penguins in the southern hemisphere, sea lions, sea turtles. And initially, we thought that killer whales ate pretty much everything and that they were all generalists, but it turns out to be a lot more complex and a lot more interesting than that. And so I'm going to talk now about studies from the Northeast Pacific, Puget Sound, Southern British Columbia, where people have been studying killer whales for about 45 years now. And what we find is that there are 3 different ecotypes there. Now, ecotypes are different forms of the same species that make a living different ways. They have different ecologies. And in the Northeast Pacific, we have 3 ecotypes of killer whales. This is one of them. This is a resident killer whale. And they are fish eaters. They live in large groups, average around 22 animals, sometimes larger, and they're quite vocal. The fish that they're after can't hear the sounds that they're making, so these killer whales are constantly in contact with each other. If the group splits up for foraging or whatever reason, they are constantly making noises and keeping track of each other. And they can use their echolocation to find fish in the water, no problem. And in the Northeast Pacific, these fish-eating residents primarily eat salmon. And actually, they their favorite salmon is Chinook salmon, of course. It's the big, expensive one, the same kind that humans gravitate towards. And this, of course, has caused a problem for them because we just don't have enough salmon to support some of these killer whale stocks the way that we used to. The second ecotype are called transient killer whales or Bigg's killer whales, and they are mammal eaters. They tend to travel around in these small groups, usually 5 animals or so. And as you might imagine, because they prey on marine mammals, which have exquisite hearing underwater, these animals are much less vocal. When they're hunting, they're completely silent. But once they find something, they will call the others over. And once they've killed something, they kind of get into a celebratory mode and actually get quite vocal. But most of the time, you don't hear much at all from them because if the other mammals hear them, they're gone. And they have some pretty dramatic hunting methods. When they're hunting cetaceans, for instance, they quite often ram them like this. This is a Dahl's porpoise, probably weighs 200, 300 pounds, being smacked out of the water. Here's a harbor porpoise that was head butted out of the water. When they're chasing something fast, the best way to dispatch them is with a headbutt rather than try to bite something moving like that, I guess. This is a minke whale. You're looking at the throat, the head sticking straight out of the water. The abrasions on there where these killer whales have been ramming it. As you might imagine, getting rammed in the throat could be pretty debilitating. And this is there's an adult male killer whale on the left, and that's almost certainly his mother there on the right. Here's another head butting. Again, the throat, they tend to target the throat quite a bit. This is a gray whale calf off the coast here. And this is a minke whale. We were in the Aleutian Islands some years ago tagging killer whales. We had a group of 4 of them next to us. We put a tag on, and all of a sudden they took off running at high speed. We thought maybe we had alarmed them. But they kept running, so we stayed with them. And we traveled with them at high speed, about 8 knots for almost exactly 1 hour. And they went to a cow and a calf minke whale that were at the surface. And the mother minke whale saw the killer whales and she left. She has no defense against the killer whales except to run fast, and her calf wasn't going to keep up with her, so she left. And the killer whales circled around for 20 seconds or so, and then the female, the matriarch, came up from below it and rammed it and knocked it out of the water. You can see here, they took it down and fed on it for the next couple hours. And this is quite interesting because these killer whales heard a sound 8 miles away. They knew exactly what it was, and they knew exactly where it was. And they swam in a straight line for an hour and went straight to this calf. So that gives you kind of an indication of the predatory power of killer whales in the ocean. They have at least this 16-mile swath when they're swimming out there listening for sounds of possible prey. These are humpback whale tails, one from Hawaii and one from Alaska. And these are killer whale tooth rake marks on their tail. And you can see where the killer whales actually took the tips off the tails. They got a little snack for their trouble, I guess. Different populations of humpbacks have different ratios of individuals with these rake marks on them. But overall, there's probably a third or almost a half in some populations that have been attacked like this. And we know from photo ID studies that most of these humpbacks don't acquire more of these tooth rake marks when they're photographed later on. This means they were almost certainly attacked when they were very young, either a calf with their mother or perhaps a yearling. And in general, large whales are thought to be pretty much immune to killer whale attack. They're just too big. So the killer whales are looking for youngsters and adults that are unhealthy. And killer whales, like human beings, have their preferred cuts of meat. And it turns out when they eat baleen whales, they like the tongue best of all. This is from a study we've been doing in Western Australia, where the killer whales come in to meet the humpbacks that are migrating north to calve, and they feed on the calves of these humpbacks. Some of them are quite young. And if they haven't eaten in a while, once they catch and kill one of these calves, they'll eat most of it. If there are lots of calves around and they've been eating quite a bit, they will catch these calves, kill them, eat the tongue, and then let the sharks have the rest. And they are taking dozens of these calves every year there, possibly over 100 calves. And we stayed with them one day for 6 hours, and they killed 3 and just ate the tongues and moved on. So killer whales are a force to be reckoned with. And another group of killer whales we're working with in southern Australia. Last year, for the first time, we recorded killer whales killing and eating blue whales, and they killed 2 of them. This is probably a yearling blue whale. It's upside down. You can see the throat pleats there. This whale was still alive, but you can see the killer whale is already trying to get his head and his mouth to try to pull the tongue out. They really like that tongue. And here's a photo I found online, and I wrote the guy who took it and asked him if I could use his photo for to give lectures, and he said, sure, no problem. And I asked him, so do you have any photos of the killer whales that occur there locally? And he said, oh, we don't have killer whales here. This whale, you can see the tongue has been ripped out, and it looks like it's still bleeding there. So it was probably within a few hours prior to him taking the picture. Killer whales had dispatched this minke whale. So when killer whales, when they feed on cetaceans, quite often what they do is ramming, and they can break ribs. There can be internal injuries. Most of the time they target the throat. When they hunt pinnipeds, it looks like they do it a bit differently, and it's probably because pinnipeds have teeth and claws. And so quite often what you see them doing is tail swatting like this. This is a young elephant seal, probably could be 300 or 400 pounds there. And this is a harbor seal sent into low Earth orbit here. You have to wonder sometimes if they're able to find these things when they give it a good healthy swat. They don't always do this with their pinniped prey. In fact, most of the time they probably go up and just give it a lethal bite, but they do like to play around with their food quite a bit, and that's what those other pictures are. This is a harbor seal. Once they've swatted them around and softened them up a bit, I guess, then they're free to go in and use their mouth to grab the seal. And if they're hungry, they'll split it up among everybody in the family. If they're not, they'll swim around, and one of the whales will carry it in their mouth. Or sometimes they'll tuck it under their pectoral fin and swim around with it for a couple hours until they're ready to feed. So we've seen 2 of the ecotypes in the Northeast Pacific: the fish-eating residents, the mammal-eating Bigg killer whales or transients. The third type we know a lot less about, and they're called offshores because that's where they are most of the time. We know that they're fish eaters, and they seem to be shark specialists. They occur in groups of approximately 50 animals. I've seen groups of 200 at times. And we know that they're shark eaters because they've been seen carrying around sharks. And whenever adults strand on beaches, the teeth are always worn down to the gum, and sharks have very abrasive skin. They used to use it for sandpaper before we started manufacturing sandpaper, and it just wears their teeth right down to the gum. So, and when they eat these sharks, they just eat the livers mostly. They'll open them up, slurp up the liver, and let the rest go. So again, being picky with their prey. So what we see in the Northeast Pacific are three largely sympatric ecotypes. And sympatric just means that they occur in the same area. You can see any of these on the same, you can see all three in the same day if you're lucky, and you might even see two at the same time. So, but they have prey specialization. They have been studying fish eaters for 45 years. They've never seen them catch or kill a marine mammal. And the same with the mammal eaters. They do not eat fish. They occur in characteristic group sizes. If you see 20 killer whales together, it's almost certainly not a group of mammal eaters. They have distinct acoustic characteristics. People who study their acoustics can tell them apart almost instantaneously, and so can they. That helps them avoid contact with each other. And we know from genetic studies that there are fixed genetic differences. They are reproductively isolated. They do not interbreed with each other. So this brings up the question, are they different species? Well, I always say if they were warblers, we would call them different species, but because they're intelligent social animals with cultural transmission, they can actually choose not to interbreed with different types. So we don't yet know if they've gone far enough down the line that they should be considered separate species, or if they have a ways to go yet. It's not a black and white situation. Oh, I put this in. I've been talking about higher latitude killer whale populations that have prey specialization. In low latitudes, especially in the tropics, there's not enough of any one kind of prey that killer whales can specialize, so they tend to feed on just about anything they come across. There's one playing frisbee with a juvenile loggerhead. They eat turtles in the tropics and just about anything of any size. Okay, so that's kind of some background information on killer whales. And now I'm going to talk about work that we've been doing in Antarctica and how the killer whales down there are similar and different. Here's a map of Antarctica. We have two main study sites. One is the peninsula area. Here you can see it juts up towards the tip of South America. And this is the warmest part of Antarctica. They call it the banana belt because it gets far enough north that you can actually see the land at times. The other place we work is at McMurdo Station in the western Ross Sea. And what we have found in Antarctica are, to date, we have described 5 different ecotypes of killer whales. We had A, B, C, and D, and then recently we split the B's into B1 and B2. One thing you can notice about these is the eye patches are quite different and distinct on these. The kind of yellower ones in the middle there, when killer whales spend time in Antarctica, they get diatoms on them. It's not the whale's skin pigment. It's an algae that grows on them when they spend time down there. And we'll see a lot of that as we go along here. So type A killer whale is a black and white killer whale with a typical eye patch. This looks like an animal you might see incarcerated at SeaWorld. They live in open water down there. They avoid the ice altogether. We see them chasing and feeding on Antarctic minke whales sometimes, and also elephant seals. And if they chase these minke whales and the minke whales make it into the ice, the killer whales just break off and let them go. This is a type B1. The B-type killer whales, they are, instead of black and white, they're two-tone gray and white. They have a darker back. This is a cape pattern. They have a very large eye patch. They do their foraging mostly in the ice, and they are looking for ice seals, like this Weddell seal here. Type B2 is very similar looking to the type B1. It's a two-tone gray and white animal. You can see some diatoms on this animal, this individual here. But it is smaller, And we're not sure what they feed on. They chase penguins around a fair amount, and they'll eat them occasionally, but mostly they like to just chase them and kill them and leave their carcasses floating on the water. So I'll talk a little bit more about these in a minute. Type C killer whale, these are found only in eastern Antarctica, and they are way deep in the ice. They have a narrow slanted eye patch, very distinctive. They also have a two-tone color pattern. And in the bottom there, you can see some typical habitat. This is fast ice. This is frozen seawater that's attached to land. And during the summertime, these cracks will open up and these killer whales will forage along these leads like this for miles into the ice. And they are fish eaters, and they're primarily interested in Antarctic toothfish. And this is by far the largest fish in Antarctic waters. They get up to a couple of 100 pounds. And this is this fish is also the target of a fishery in Antarctic waters. So there's some management concerns here. Interestingly, these same killer whales will feed on some tiny little fish at times. This is an ice fish, and they live on the bottom of the ice in the bottom side of the fast ice. And the killer whales will swim along, and if they see some, they'll blow bubbles out of their blowhole and flush them out of the ice and grab them as they scrabble around. Okay, so moving on to another type here. In 1955, 17 killer whales stranded in New Zealand. They were very odd-looking killer whales. They had very rounded heads. They had these pointy back-swept dorsal fins, and they all had these tiny little eye patches. And for those of us who have been working on killer whales for quite a while, nobody ever knew what to make of these because they were so different, and nobody ever saw anything like them. So if you figure that they're all related to one female, maybe she had some kind of genetic disorder and she passed it along to the group and they all died, and that was the end of it. But then about 50 years later, I was at a killer whale meeting in Seattle, and a French researcher from Crozet Island in the South Indian Ocean showed me some pictures of some killer whales that they had adjacent to the island there that were taking fish off the long lines there. And the minute I saw them, I knew that those were the long lost New Zealand whales. And over the years, we've been collecting photos of killer whales to get an idea about where these different types go. And we have now about 30 some records of type D killer whales. Turns out they're found all around Antarctica, but they don't get into Antarctic waters per se. They go down to about the polar front. Sometimes I think they get trapped in a warm core eddy or something, and they'll show up in cold water. But for the most part, they are in subantarctic waters. And in fact, we've offered a common name for this animal, subantarctic killer whale. So here's just kind of a sampler of some of the different kinds of killer whales you can see if you're down in Antarctic waters. And you can see they are quite different looking, and ecologically they're quite distinct also. And it's going to require more research, especially looking at genetics to determine if these are in fact different species or if they should be subspecies or what their status is. So I'm going to talk about the research that we do in Antarctica. It's logistically a kind of a difficult place to work. And in the Ross Sea, that's actually the farthest place you can sail a boat in the world. And to get to McMurdo, actually, you have to break 10 or 15 miles of ice. So every year they open up an ice channel into McMurdo so that the supply ships can come in. And a lot of research is done out of McMurdo. We've done a fair amount of killer whale research. And basically what we do is we use a helicopter. We fly out along the ice edge or along the channel, look for killer whales swimming along the edges there. Flap a mile or so ahead, land the helicopter, and then go out and meet them on the ice. And the helicopter here is sitting on frozen seawater, several feet thick. And then we walk right out, and there are the whales. And this is probably the best place in the world to do killer whale research. You can literally get up to within a few feet of wild killer whales. So we can do all our research here as they swim by. Sometimes they get into pools and they'll hang out for hours. And so it's a very good situation for working on killer whales. So I put in a little anecdote here. This is a type C killer whale. We were at the ice edge one day, and the killer whales were filing by, and I wondered what they would do if they knew we were there. So I picked up a handful of this dry snow and managed to make a snowball out of it, and one came right next to the edge there, and I threw it at her, and it made a little pat sound, and I didn't think she was even going to feel it, but she just stopped where she was, and then she rolled over and went under the water, and I thought that was it. But then in the brash ice, in the background there, all of a sudden a piece of ice about the size of a volleyball started moving toward the middle of the channel there, and then she resurfaced with her volleyball, and she tossed it out of the water probably 8 or 10 times, and you can see her doing that here. And she did that until she got bored, and then she turned around and continued swimming on with her friends there. And I try not to get too involved in this sort of stuff emotionally, but I can't help but think I taught a killer whale how to throw snowballs. In the peninsula area, there's a lot less ice. It's mostly open water, especially these days. And we've been fortunate enough to get support from especially National Geographic to work off of their boat. When we find killer whales, they put us over the side. The paying passengers are always interested in seeing killer whales, so it works out well for everybody. You can see the yellow diatoms on these killer whales here. These are B2s. So some of the research tools we use for studying killer whales, probably the most important thing that we can do is just take pictures of them. Pictures of the dorsal fin and the saddle patch. Here's the same whale, 34 years apart. They get marks on them that last their entire lifetime, and so it's the trailing edge of the dorsal fin gets little nicks and stuff, and then they get scars and bites on the saddle patch. And any killer whale that's over about a year old, you can identify them pretty much for the rest of their life, unless they get really banged up. But and when you have this information, you can estimate group sizes or estimate lifespan for these animals. You can estimate population sizes in the area that you're working in. You can tell how often females calve, when they come of age, how long they live. There's a tremendous amount of information you can get from just taking pictures of these animals. And this is always our first option when we encounter killer whales. Next thing we do is try to satellite tag whales, because then we get a much better idea about their movements. And here's our tag. The tag goes into the dorsal fin. These tags will last usually anywhere from 1 month to maybe 5.5 months. And most of them are position tags. We have quite a few depth tags now too that gives us a dive profile. It shows us how often they dive and how deep. So a lot of information from these tags. And these tags will stay in the dorsal fin. There's one. Until they're like a splinter for the whale. The tissue rejection will spit this out at some time in the future, and it'll just drop to the ocean floor. And here's the dart that we fired to put that tag in place. We've also done some aerial photogrammetry. This was in the early days when we used the helicopter to go out and fly over these things. And we have an altimeter and taking pictures, and we record the height same time we take the picture. We know the focal length of the lens, and we can actually measure these killer whales from pixel to pixel either end and get length estimates that are usually good within a couple of inches. So we can learn about the morphometrics of these different populations. And I like this photo because the helicopter made quite a bit of noise, and whenever we flew over a cow with a calf, like in the upper right there, she always called that calf over and threw her flipper over to kind of tuck it in there, not taking any chances. So this is some data from that exercise. The black bars are the length of these type C killer whales. The white bars are the length of killer whales that were killed by Russian whalers during 1 year in Antarctica, and IWC closed them down after that year, so there haven't been any more killer whales killed there since then. But they caught over 1,200, and you can see the largest type C killer whale, the black bar, is about 6 meters. So it's, and then the rest of these animals are where the whaling happens is outside of the ice edge generally. So they're out there where the type A's are and the large type B's. So that's probably what that represents. And this is significant because what it means is these type C killer whales are it's probably going to be physically impossible for them to breed with these other types of killer whales. The other whales are just too big. They're up to almost 9.5 meters there. So these are animals that are, half again as long as the type C's. Also, the type C's, they are small fish eaters. These other whales are large mammal eaters, and it's a possibility that the large whales actually prey on the type C's. So we can get information about the health of individuals and populations. Now we're using drones instead of helicopters, and here's a B2 killer whale in very bad shape. You can see behind the blowhole there, where the sides of the head is concave. These are called peanut heads. This animal is emaciated, and my guess is it didn't last a whole lot longer after this photo was taken. But you can go through, take pictures of entire populations, and you can see how healthy they are just based on the amount of fat that they have on them. And you can actually see them grow during the season that they're down there if they're feeding normally. This animal has a lot of diatoms on it. Thing is, to migrate someplace where we can get rid of those diatoms, it needs to have a lot of fat, and it's not going to be able to make the trip. So we also record acoustics. Here's one of our co-workers with a hydrophone in the water there and a curious type C. We have recorded A's, type A, both B's and C's now, and are putting out a series of papers on their calls. And hopefully at some time in the future, once we have described the calls of these whales, that should allow us to do passive surveys from vessels working in Antarctic waters. They can tow hydrophones, make recordings, and we get a better idea about the relative population sizes of these animals and their distribution. So interesting stuff. We do quite a bit of biopsy. This is a small crossbow here, bouncing a dart off a killer whale swimming on the edge there. It's nice to collect the darts because they just bounce back on the ice. With this biopsy sample, we get a little plug about the size of a pencil eraser. This will provide information about genetics, how many species of killer whales there might be out there. We can look at differences between and within populations. We can tell if it's a female, and if it's a female, if it's pregnant. We can look at pollutant loads. We can look at, get some idea about food habits by looking at stable isotopes and amino acids. So this one little bit of flesh that we take off the animal provides a whole library of information. So ecotypes. I'm just going to give you some information here on the different ecotypes and how they make a living in Antarctica. This is the type A, the open water black and white form. They are pretty conspicuous when they're chasing minke whales, and they will chase them for 20 miles or so at high speed before they can bring them down at times. At first we thought that's all they were eating was minke whales, but now we've seen them taking elephant seals a number of times, and it's a lot less dramatic. They come up underneath the elephant seal and just drag it down under the water, and if you don't have an eye on them at the time, you'd never even guess that was going on. So we think that they probably eat more elephant seals than we had thought. The B2s, as I said, they spend a fair amount of time chasing around penguins, but as often as not, they just leave the carcasses on the water. And when they do eat them, interestingly enough, even though as small as it is, they take the breast muscles off of them. They're rather like humans. That'd probably be the only part that we would eat too. So, and these B2s, penguins are the only thing that we saw them chasing and killing for 10 years worth of work down there. And then last year, we, for the first time, we found some B2s, two different groups, each killed a Weddell seal. We had never seen that before or suspected it. And here's a drone view of a killer whale group. And there's several others down underwater there. And this is how they do their feeding. They've got a seal there and they're all calmly tearing it apart and sharing with each other. So we don't know what this means that they're taking these seals now. And it may be related to that picture I showed you earlier of the emaciated individual. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So type B1 killer whales. We call these pack ice killer whales. When they're traveling together in open water, they bunch up like regular killer whales. But once they get into an area where there's ice like this, and this is flow ice, this is frozen seawater that's breaking up with the summer season. When they get into this kind of habitat, the group spreads out and they all start spy hopping like this. They're lifting their heads up out of the water. And what they're looking for is seals on the ice. A lot of these seals feed at night and then mainly haul out during the daytime on the ice, take it easy, warm up. And the killer whales are looking for them. This is a Weddell seal. And what will happen is when one of these killer whales finds a seal, he'll look at it a few times, moving around the ice floe, and then he'll disappear for about 20 seconds, and then he'll come back up and look at it some more. And within about a minute or two, the whole rest of the family shows up at the same time, and then they all start spy hopping, taking a look at the seal on the ice. And while we were down there, it turns out that there were a lot of crab-eater seals on the ice, but the killer whales weren't interested in them. There were a few leopard seals. They didn't want a leopard seal. They only wanted Weddell seals. So part of the spy hopping is making sure that they get their species right. So after a couple minutes of everybody taking a good hard look, a decision is made, and one of two things happens. Either they spread out and start spy hopping again, if it's a crab eater, for instance. But if it's a Weddell seal, they bunch up like this, kind of shoulder to shoulder. They swim 20 meters or so away from the ice floe. They turn abruptly around and start charging at it at high speed. They pull in very close to each other. And just as they get to the ice, they all dive at the same time. As they're approaching the ice like this, they are furiously pumping their tails in synchrony, and it creates a wave just as they dive under the ice. And they've got this wave-making procedure all figured out. The crest of the wave is usually right in line with the seal there. That's where the most power is. And during this whole process, the seal has been rather blasé about this whole operation. And the reason is because they only ever get to see this once. So there's no learning curve involved here. Here's a different view of a different seal, and you can see that wave crest, pointed right at the seal there. It breaks over the ice, knocks the seal into the water, and the killer whales that have charged the ice, they go under the ice, and they are waiting on the other side of the ice floe when the seal washes in the water, and they will grab it by the flippers and pull it down and try to drown it. Sometimes the seal will jump back out on the ice floe and they will wash it off again. And they can do this 3, 4, 5 times until they get their seal, and they almost always do. Well, another anecdote here. A professional photographer sent me a photo a few years ago of some type B1 wave washer killer whales. And he said they were following them as they were swimming along, and they came to an ice floe, and it had 4 Adelie penguin fledglings on it. They had recently left their nest. They lined up, they made a wave and washed them off into the water. 3 hopped out. They washed them off again. 2 hopped out. They washed them off again, and there was only 1 left. And so they reformed, washed the penguin off into the water, and they didn't know what happened to these penguins. They presumed that they were eaten, but they didn't know. But when they washed the last penguin off, this killer whale came to the surface with the penguin in his mouth, and you can see it there. And the killer whale swam back over to the ice floe, put his chin on it, opened his mouth, and the penguin hopped out, flapped his wings, and walked to the other side. And the killer whale turned around and swam off with his buddies. So what's going on there? So what have we learned from our times in Antarctica? Well, from our satellite tagging, these are type B2 killer whales. And what we see is after we tag them, they spend anywhere from a few days to a couple of months. And then one day they take off. They travel at high speed, 8 knots or so, nonstop to just about the latitude of southern Brazil. They turn around and they come straight back at the same speed. We know that they're not feeding because they come right back where they left to the same area that they were feeding, and they're not slowing down anywhere. They're almost certainly not having calves because they're traveling too fast. A newborn calf is not going to be able to travel 8 knots for weeks on end. So, and although they go straight up and straight back, this is still a fairly long trip. It's about 6 or 7 weeks. Here's tagging data from the other side of Antarctica. These are type C killer whales, and basically we see exactly the same thing. High speed, nonstop travel to low latitudes, and then they turn around and come straight back. If you look in the panel in the upper left, that whale is coming right back down the same lane that it went up. And you can see from where these different whales went that they're not going to the same area, and there are no topographic features out there to think that they might be feeding or something. They're just going out kind of in the middle of nowhere, turning around and going back. So here's what the water temperatures look like with their tracks mapped onto them. And basically you can see that they are heading up into warm water. And these are the 4 different Antarctic types here. They're going to the nearest warm water, right to the edge of the tropics, and turning around and coming back. Well, most large whale migration is thought to involve whales, fin whale, blue whales, humpbacks, right whales, going to the tropics just so that they can calve. And there's never been any convincing reasons about why they should go to the tropics to calve, except that it might be a little better for the calf if it was warmer water. Maybe it could grow a little faster. Or maybe it's because there are less killer whales in the tropics. But now we know that killer whales make this same trip. So why make this trip? What's behind this? Well, we're back to diatoms now, and we think that this probably has a lot to do with it. Killer whales are the smallest whales that occur in Antarctic waters. And whales and dolphins everywhere, they're like humans. They shed their skin all the time. In order to do that, you have to have blood flow to the epidermis. But we think that killer whales are small enough that when they get into actually sub-freezing Antarctic waters, and it does get below freezing because it's salt water, we think that what they do is they shut off the blood flow to the outer skin. It saves the heat loss, But what happens is, because they're not shedding, they're vulnerable to things like diatoms that can infest their skin there. And there's a number of other problems. If they get any wounds or sores, they're not going to heal. If you're a small animal, a young animal, you're not going to even be able to grow. So there's a lot of reasons to replace your skin. There's a lot of reasons to want to stay warm. So we think they just do this in two different areas. And here's, this is the same whale on a different month in 2 different years. The upper photo was 2010. You can see it's got quite a few diatoms on it. The lower one here is what we think they look like when they come back from the tropics. They've shed their skin and the diatoms fall off with it. Just like they come back from the car wash. So we think that probably works for killer whales. How about other whales? Well, when whalers started whaling in Antarctica, one of the things they noticed was that there were clean, skinny whales around, which they assumed had just come back from the tropics. And there were fat yellow whales that were covered with diatoms. And they figured it took about a month, maybe 2, for them to accumulate those diatoms. And the whalers actually looked for the yellow whales because it meant that they were going to be much fatter because they had been feeding in Antarctica. And this is a minke whale that we photographed in the Drake Passage. He's swimming upside down, those throat pleats there. He's kind of a snowy white. This is what they look like after they've been in Antarctica for a while. So, and blue whales, the whalers call them sulfur bottoms because they were all yellow on the white areas underneath. They'd never seen anything like that in the North Atlantic. So it looks like maybe all the whales in Antarctica are possibly doing the same thing and maybe making these migration trips just so they can molt their skin. Extreme divers. Those tags we put on them, we got quite a bit of dive information from some of these things. This is type C killer whales from McMurdo, and you can see they're going down 300-400 meters. That's kind of what you expect for a fish eater to dive deep. And let me show you here. Oops. This is we put some tags on some type B1s. Those are the wave washers, the mammal eaters, and you can see that they're most of their dives are less than 50 meters. If you're going to be chasing after air-breathing mammals, you don't need to dive down deep. In fact, if you wait at the surface, they'll come to you and they'll probably be out of breath when they do. So that's the kind of pattern you expect for a mammal eater. And down in the bottom right there, that's a dive pattern of the type B2, and they are clearly into the fish-eating dive depths there. There's 400 or 500 meters fairly regularly. So that's why we think that B2s are probably fish eaters, although finding them feeding on seals has got us a little stumped at the current time. But they're definitely going down deep. We think they could be after squid, but we think that they're probably after fish. And the type C fish eaters up at the top there, they're going down 300 or 400 meters, but that's kind of the depth of McMurdo Sound. So we still haven't got to how deep these killer whales can actually go. The previous studies had them diving only to 100 or so meters, but they were tagged on the continental shelf near the continental United States, so that didn't really provide good information. Turns out they are quite deep divers. Photo identification. Currently we have, this is an old slide, we probably have over 100,000 photos now. The 250 collaborators are way up. These are naturalists and tourists actually on tour boats to Antarctica. And you can see kind of the route that they do here. Some of them go to the Falklands and then South Georgian, but most of them go from the tip of South America to the Antarctic Peninsula. And there's a lot of encounters hidden under those black dots in there. So this has 350, I think we're over 500 now. And from that catalog, we have come up with population estimates for the different types of killer whales in the peninsula area. There's about 150 type A's. They are increasing, and it probably has to do with the fact that the ice is melting down there and there's more open water. That's their habitat. The type B's, the B1s, there's actually probably less than 100, but we have a good estimate now. I don't have it with me here. They are holding steady, and they are receding with the ice as it melts. They're harder to find every year because the ice is harder to find every year. And then the B2s, our estimate's about 900, and they are declining, and we are not sure why. As a fish eater, there are fisheries operating in the peninsula area, and they may be at a competitive disadvantage there. We don't know. And then type C killer whales on the other side of Antarctica in McMurdo Sound. We have identified 352 individuals in the catalog. And based on the resighting data, there is a resident population of about 70 individuals that spend the whole summer there, working up and down the ice edge there and in the channel. And the rest of them are quote unquote transients. They are probably whales from other populations that are starting to migrate. So lots of them go through, they probably socialize and feed for a little bit and then move on. Genetic studies, we are still doing quite a few genetic studies. And the most recent thing that we did was to split the bees, the large bees and the little bees. We knew that they were different because one of the large bees is about 1 meter larger and a much huskier animal than the small bees. The small bees occur in much larger groups, and we see whenever the large bees are around, we see them spy hopping around the ice. They're almost always found with ice, and you can tell when they're around because you see their heads poking out of the water. The small bees don't do that. They're in more open water. So we had a pretty good idea that these were different, and we have shown genetically that they rarely, if ever, interbreed. So clearly, at least subspecies level differences here. Ecosystem impacts. So what happens when you are able to make population estimates and you have some idea about what these things are feeding on, and then you start getting into some interesting stuff and looking at the ecological impacts of these animals. And for instance, here's a type B1 killer whale. If we estimate there's about 100 of them, killer whales eat about 5% of their body weight per day. And we throw out a figure, an average weight of 8,000 pounds. And the average seal that they take weighs maybe 400 pounds. Well, when you go through this, you come up with over 36,000 seals killed a year if they specialize on these seals all the time. So you can see a relatively small population adds up to a really big impact in a relatively localized area. And I should also add that Weddell seals are reportedly declining in the peninsula area, perhaps not surprising. Look at another one. This is type B2. They're about 20 feet long, weigh maybe 6,000 pounds. So that's about 300 pounds of food a day. And that means that this population of 900 whales will consume on the order of 49,000 tons a year of whatever it is they eat. I think it's primarily fish, as I say, but as we say, their numbers are declining. It may be food related, and it may be related to these observations that we had last year of them feeding on seals for what we think is the first time. So this is the kind of information that you need to understand what the needs are of these animals and what the potential impacts are for instance, human fishing in these areas. So this is the kind of stuff that we're interested in. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Bob. That was great. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure if we were all together, you hear lots of clapping right now. But for those folks that are online, go ahead and put any questions. I'm sure you have them into the chat box. And Bob, we'll get started here. I have a first question. I think you answered several parts of it, but you talked about why the whales get diatoms on their skin, and you talked a little bit about how they get rid of them. Can you talk a little bit about why they might want to get rid of them? Does it slow them down? Does it irritate them to have the diatoms on their skin?
Yes. I think they're less interested in getting rid of the diatoms than they are in just molting their skin. I think the diatoms are just an indication that they're not going through the normal molt process. I can imagine some of these have really heavy infestations of these diatoms, and it must affect their swimming efficiency, but I'm not sure it really bothers them. It's hard to know. But I think mostly they're just interested in molting, not just getting rid of diatoms.
Okay. We have another question about, do the mama's boys breed, and who do they breed with if they're staying with their female group?
You know, nobody's ever seen killer whales mating, but we know that when groups come together, there's a lot of socializing going on. They think that that's a possibility. And also, sometimes the males will take off for a while. Generally not very long, but you know, they find other groups and they disappear for a day or so, and may happen then. They're very discreet.
Okay. So I have another question here that's about the different ecotypes that primarily eat fish or primarily eat mammals. Do we have evidence that they ever switch their prey? And if so, do they also change their communication styles accordingly?
That's an interesting question, because that communication, I think, points out a big disadvantage to hybridizing between fish eaters and mammal eaters. Any of the offspring, I think, are going to, it might be problematic for them, depending on how much genetic control there is on something like that. And I would also say that in the world today, not so very long ago, there were quite a few less mammal-eating killer whales and lots more fish-eating killer whales. And this is a legacy of the mammal and sealing era, because we took away a lot of their food, and we didn't protect killer whales either. So for a long time, mammal-eating killer whales in the Pacific Northwest were actually quite rare, but now that we have the Marine Mammal Protection Act, there's lots of harbor seals out there, cetaceans are picking up, whale populations are increasing. We have lots of mammal-eating killer whales these days. Fish-eating killer whales have a problem, and they are the endangered populations. It's because they tend to eat the same kinds of fish that we do, and a lot of their stocks have declined, both the fish and the whales. So if you're a fish-eating whale, you're not doing so well these days. If you're a mammal eater, it's a good time to be here.
We're getting lots of questions, so I'm going to try to get through a couple of them.
Hold on, the question about switching the diet. Some years ago, back when they were catching killer whales for captive, to put them in the ocean area, they caught 3 mammal-eating killer whales. This is before they knew the difference between fish eaters and mammal eaters. They caught 3 mammal eaters, and they kept them in an ocean pen, and they fed them fish every day, and they wouldn't eat the fish. And after 75 days, one of them starved to death rather than eat a fish. The 2 other ones, after that one died, they started eating fish a little bit. They ended up letting them go because they weren't feeding normally, and they went right back to eating mammals. They saw them again later. So a lot of these animals are very loath. Once they get locked into a certain prey specialization, they do not want to switch. So that's why we're kind of interested in these B2s in Antarctica, because it seems like there's at least a possibility that might be going on there. So we don't know.
We have an acoustics question. Have acoustic questions been used to study KW communication, and what does it distinguish on ecotypes?
Yes, the different ecotypes have distinct calls. They use that distinctness to tell each other apart. For instance, in the Pacific Northwest, mammal-eating, fish-eating killer whales never interact. They avoid each other entirely. They have nothing to do with each other. And so it's important for them to be able to tell them apart. And people who work on acoustics can easily tell the different ecotypes apart. And we're learning how to do that now with Antarctic killer whales.
We have a question here. Can you talk about what the purpose is of the different shapes of the eye patches in the killer whales that you're studying?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is the most conspicuously patterned cetacean in the world, I guess. And you know, it's a predator, and you'd think that they'd be more cryptically colored, but because they live in the ocean, by the time they get close enough that something can see their bizarre color pattern, it's already too late. So I think that it may be important for telling different types apart. The ones with the big eye patches that create the waves and stuff, they have to closely coordinate their hunting activities, and they probably do it visually and not acoustically. So it's probably important to have these landmarks on their body so they can tell what the animals around them are doing. But that's just speculation.
Interesting. One last question before we wrap it up for the night, because we're hanging on just a little past time. Can you talk a little bit more about the interaction with fisheries in killer whales in the areas where you're studying, and whether there's lobbying against killer whales because of competition, some of that human dimensions component?
Yeah, there are a number of problems, and they all have to do with fishery interactions. Lots of places around the world there is killer whale depredation. Killer whales have learned to take big, expensive fish off fishing lines, especially long liners. And they know the sound of the boats. They know when the gear is coming in. They hear it miles away. And in the past, they've gotten shot at, and it doesn't take them long to figure out how to avoid that. So it's a big problem in quite a few places. And some of the population that do this depredation, their numbers are actually increasing. So they're benefiting from this interaction. Places like the Pacific Northwest, where the southern residents depend on salmon runs that are, just a fraction of what they used to be. The fish-eating killer whales up there are also just a fraction of what they used to be. There used to be huge numbers of killer whales and salmon, and now we have relatively few of both these days. So I think we need to take care of both those stocks.
All right, I'm pulled in. I've got one more question for you, and I can't just let it go because I'm really curious. Do we know how long ago they've diversified from the most common ancestor?
Yeah, I think it's like 250,000 years ago, something like that, 300,000. So not all that long ago. Most of those odontocetes have radiated pretty recently. So.
Wonderful. Again, we're getting lots of, this is so interesting. Thank you so much, and applause coming in. I just wanted to add to mine and just say thank you so much, Bob, for sharing with us. I sure appreciate it. I've been excited to hear you speak to us for a long time. So thank you for making it happen. Even though it's virtual, I'm just really excited to have you. For everybody online, thank you so much for joining us tonight and being a part of this conversation. Please join us again for our next virtual Science on Tap at November 19th. And until then, keep learning, keep sharing, and we'll see you again sometime in the future. Again, thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it all.
Sure, my pleasure.
All right, I'm going to end the presentation, everybody. See you later. Thank you.